Control over yourself,
Yeah.
self-regulation. It's something that from kind of situation that you're describing, I would even see that for somebody, something that seems impossible. I
Yeah.
can't control myself. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say would be the starting point to start doing it or start practicing it? Because big part of, I don't even know if it's big part of healing, but it can help when it comes to self-regulation that you don't respond certain way or you don't give in to
Yeah.
certain triggers. And big part of it is your ability to control yourself,
Yes.
which it can be empowering once you know how to do that. But
Right.
before you're there, it can be really frustrating.
Yep.
And it can also cause a lot of limiting beliefs. Like, if I can't even control myself, what can I control in my life? Kind of thing. Um, so where to
And it
start when it
starts even
comes
bigger
to,
than that.
yeah?
It starts bigger than that. Because for me, so much of what the switch for me happened when I had the moment of realizing, truly realizing I have no control over anything else, anybody else, anything else. I only have control over me.
Okay.
And for me, as I've described on my podcast, that angered me when I realized that. Because the thing that we do in survival mode is we are trying to control everything. And it's not because we're trying to be bossy, but it's because it's the way that we feel safe.
Yeah,
But it's
protection
also
mechanism.
impossible. It's completely impossible. You can't control everything else. So that moment that I realized that I had no control over anybody, anything really, I had, it was very frustrating. I got quite angry because I had been juggling those balls for so many years and I was exhausted. But then when I took a moment and thought about it, it was like, this is actually liberating because
Mm.
I don't have to worry about all that other stuff anymore. And so that's why I say it's enough just taking care of this
Hmm.
and managing this. And what it did is it opened up the brain space for me to be able to focus on myself rather than trying to focus on situations and controlling them and managing them, which is impossible. I now had the brain space, and it's not always easy to start working on myself. And it gave me that space to slow down my reactions and pay attention to my behaviors and everything kind of slowed down a little bit so I could start taking it in and start working on it. Because before my complete focus was trying to control everything else. Because again, it wasn't because excuse me, I was trying to be a control freak. It was because that was the only way I felt safe.
So, okay, before we go into self-control, so with this, what would be helpful thing to hear for somebody who is in a situation where they struggle to let go that sense of, or like that attempt to try to control everything?
It's you got to pay attention because that control thing is it hides. It hides in plain sight. And so, you just the thing that I did is I paid attention to what my motivation was. When I went to do something, what was my motivation? Why was I doing that? That was one of the things that really kind of helped me.
Do you have an example?
Um, oh, um, Well, in my old days, I'll bring up an old thing,
Hmm.
old days when I was passive aggressive. And I would do something. That's what made me realize I was passive aggressive is I started paying attention and I forget it was something at work.
Hmm.
And it was not a cool thing that I was going to do. And I realized it because I stopped and I went, why am I doing this? What 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 am I expecting to come out of this? And it hit me just like, oh, this is really not nice. But it was a self-preserving thing that I was trying to do. When I realized the implication that it was going to have on others was when I went, oh, that's really shitty. I can't do that. That's really shitty.
How do you how do you draw a line? let's say you end up doing that thing, or you might have done other things. How do you
Big,
not, well, I want to say perfect, but it's not perfect, but perfect, for example, or question, how do you not see yourself as a bad person? Or how do
um,
you avoid, let's say somebody has done something where they instantly maybe jump to that thought of, oh, I did that, I must be a bad person.
it's really the most important thing is separating who you are from what you do. And when we haven't begun our healing journey, that gets jumbled, and our identity is our behavior. And so
Mhm.
when we do something wrong, then we're bad. And so much of that comes from our childhood. And so realizing the thing that was so freeing for me was realizing that, and how I could forgive myself too, is realizing that so much of that behavior that I did, there were consequences, and there should be. But I did it because of the pain I was in. I did it as a result of, survival mechanism that I was in coming from my childhood abuse. It doesn't excuse what I did and why, how I did it and the effects that it had on people. And that's some of the cleanup I've had to do over the years. But I can now go, okay, I did that because of this. And as I was putting the workshop together and I was seeing the list of behaviors for all the different things that happen in childhood, and I had almost every single one of them,
Yeah.
it's really easy for me to go, God, that explains so much. And I go into it with curiosity rather than, God, I can't believe I did all that. Oh my God, what a terrible, no, because I tell you, if I hadn't been abused, I probably wouldn't have done most of those things. I'm not doing them now.
So,
Goodness.
how do you, one thing that I also wrote down was about, maybe you can comment a bit on that because I feel like it applies both to trying to control others and controlling yourself, about forward thinking. So in your
Oh,
example
yeah.
that you said that you didn't end up doing whatever you were like thinking to do because you thought about like, oh, what I'm trying to accomplish here, that's forward thinking.
Yeah,
So
it's
do you
critical.
know where it came, like how did you even like ask, thought to ask yourself that question? Because that's quite profound question to come up with.
I think because I felt like, excuse me, I felt like growing up that I wasn't loved and I wasn't appreciated, that I was a bad person for people. And so I didn't want to hurt people. I had this thing about I didn't want to hurt people.
Mhm.
And so I had enough of that and I'd see it. And God, when I would hurt people, when I would do it on purpose or not on purpose, the pain that I would physically go through because of that was just too much. And so I got to the point where I was, but I went hyper the other way to the point where I was detrimental to myself. And, I was way out of balance and I became like a huge people pleaser.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it started. And it was out of balance. Obviously it was, I had to get it back into balance. And now, um, especially I'm at a point now in my life when I know it's something very important, uh, sensitive or critical or something, where it could be a game changer. I take it really serious. And I don't want to overthink it, but I certainly want to be able to process it enough that I come to an answer that's going to benefit everybody as much as possible.
What's the role of compassion there?
Keeps me from hurting people
And yourself.
and myself. Yeah. Yeah. The compassion, um, it's really a gift. Out of balance, it becomes a problem, right? It can be people pleasing, it can go into a whole different direction. But compassion is what is, I think everybody needs it to a certain degree. Some of us have it more than others, and that's okay. Um, but it's critical in being able to help get messages across, help people. It keeps us from, it can certainly slow down a lot of the hurt that can happen.
Yeah. And also it,
If everything we say or do goes through a filter of compassion to a certain degree, imagine how different the world would be. Mhm.
yeah. and also not only how we treat others, but even like through self-compassion, things that we don't do to ourselves, or
Right.
even like with overworking or like burnout and things like
Mhm.
that. Being able,
Mhm.
I literally had just had conversation with somebody, um, like she was saying that she got sick or she woke up with like headache or something and she didn't work for like first part of the day, and she would beat herself up for it. She's like, oh,
Yeah.
I should be working on my
Yeah.
business. um and it's so easy to do that.
Mhm.
And she ended up like doing some work in the evening, which I said to her, like, that's good that you ended up doing it, but it also depends on like where you came from when you did it, because you can
Right.
come from a place where you're like, oh, I haven't done anything, so now I have to
Yeah.
do it, and you kind of like there's so much negative behind it.
Right.
um or it can come from a place of, okay, like I, because I think there's a balance, especially when you are in your own boss, because that's
Yeah.
your boss can be like one of the harshest critics that you can
Yes.
have. um and also we don't give ourselves like any, literally any compassion. It's just like you have to go, you have
Mhm.
to hustle. um
Yeah.
but taking that step back and being like, okay, like today I don't feel well, I will just allow myself to take a day off, and maybe not necessarily enjoy it if I'm sick or I have headache or
Right.
whatever, but at least,
Don't feel
show my,
guilty.
yeah. But then the other end is like how you find balance between, and I think that's an interesting balance to find, is the balance between compassion and accountability. Because it can go to the end where
Yeah.
to one side, when now all the excuses become so strong that you're like, yeah, actually I don't feel like doing it today, so I'm just going to be
Yeah.
nice to myself. And I see this a lot in wellness space, where it's like,
Yes.
I kind of don't feel like doing it today, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do whatever I feel like doing, which I am not against that, but I feel like there must be a balance between, you do take care of yourself and you have self-compassion, but also a lot of the times, especially when it comes to growth, there's a lot of discomfort there. Even healing,
Yeah.
so much discomfort. Like it
Yes.
doesn't feel good. I hate to say this, but it doesn't feel good.
No,
Um,
not when you're going through it. Mm-mm.
yeah, not when you go through. When you look back, you might even feel slightly melancholic because you're like, wow, I went through that and I kind of endured and I kind of did it.
Yeah.
And you know that you're the person you are because you went through that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, in the moment, yeah, that doesn't feel good.